Hello everyone, I'm David Instruments CPA in Atlanta, and welcome to Basic Excel Skills for Accountants. Over the course of our time together today, we're going to cover a wide variety of features and worksheet functions in Microsoft Excel, all aimed at making accounting tasks be more efficient. A phrase I coined a number of years ago is either you work Excel or it works you, and for many of us, Excel tends to push us around. We end up taking much more time to do tasks because we don't realize that there are features or worksheet functions that can make the work easier. So I've pulled together a number of topics that can help improve your day-to-day experience in Excel. And the more that we learn about Excel, the easier it is to learn that next element of Excel. So even if you don't need every single thing in the presentation, the broader your awareness becomes of what's possible in Excel, makes it that much easier to figure out how to do the things that are even more closely tailored to your day-to-day work. I am going to be teaching from the Office 365 version of Excel, and Office 365 is the latest and greatest version of Excel. And one thing that's different about Office 365 is it is a subscription-based product. So software companies are easing their way away from selling us perpetual licenses that we pay once for, and instead what we have are situations where if we want to use software, more and more programs, we have to opt into an ongoing subscription. And so it's not all downside, particularly with regard to Excel, because historically with the perpetual licenses, let's say that you bought Excel 2016, well, you wouldn't ever see anything new about Excel 2016. You'd have to wait 3 years until perhaps Excel 2019 came out, and then that version would give you a few new features. With Office 365, Microsoft is pushing out new features all throughout the year, so there's no longer a 3-year delay to see anything change in Excel. And also they have some particularly exciting features on the horizon there. We're not going to get into those because they're not rolled out to everyone, but some things that are on the horizon are a new type of worksheet function known as dynamic arrays. And what's going to be different about dynamic arrays is rather than having to take the formula and put it in every cell where you want to display results, you'll put the formula in a single cell and then the results will spill into as many other cells as are needed. So it's going to greatly change our relationship with how we build spreadsheets and improve the integrity of them. There's also a new lookup function known as XLOOKUP that is currently being tested, and that's coming out in Office 365 as well. Those features won't ever make it into the older versions that you will have to use Office 365 to benefit from that. With regard to our material today, I will be covering everything at least twice. I'll first walk you through it on the PowerPoint slides, which are very detailed and have numbered steps, and then I'll go over to Excel and carry out those techniques firsthand. You should have already been provided the handouts for today's presentation, but if you did not receive them or mislaid them, you can always email me, ask@davidringstrom.com. Be happy to get you those handouts. So let's begin with summing data. We're going to look at summing data a couple different ways. And summing spreadsheets, the sum function is the most widely used function in Excel, but it also carries with it a lot of risk. Because many times when we go to create a sum formula, such as we look at the left-hand panel there, we create a formula that is maybe equals sum B2 through B6. So when we look at an Excel worksheet function and we see that colon in there, think of the word through. In this case, we want to sum cells B2 through B6. And that formula is accurate until it isn't. Let's say in the middle there, we decide to add a new product at the top of the list. So we right-click, we insert a new row, we add that new product. Notice the formula shifts to be B3 through B7. And so when we are entering data into our spreadsheet, if we insert new rows at the top or the bottom of the range, then in that case, that's where things can get left out of our totals. So a technique that I like to use to ensure that I can future-proof my spreadsheet is I employ what I call buffer rows. Notice at the right-hand side, if I'm going to sum the data, I don't actually sum the actual data itself. I go one row above and also one row below. So the risk for having our sums not update properly is when someone adds something at the top or the bottom of the sum range there. If you're inserting rows in the middle, then the range will expand and the rows in the middle will be included. It's around the edges where that risk lies. And so putting a buffer around that, extending what we're summing, then closes that gap and means that you can rest assured that you can add data anywhere in there, and very unlikely that you'll end up with a formula that omits part of the data that you need to sum. So to see that in Excel here, we'll do our sums two different ways. Part of the risk arises because many of us, rightly so, rely on the auto sum feature. So on the home menu, there's a button that we can click. That's the auto sum button. It's also on the formulas menu. It actually has a more formal name there of auto sum. So we can click either place. When we click that, notice Excel sums exactly the data that we intended there. And so that's where we can have a formula that works until it doesn't. So just to show you that formula there, that's the formula we presently have. Now, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to come along and I'm going to insert a new row. And then I'm just going to copy this and repurpose it here. So we'll put in watermelon here. We're going to change these amounts to 5,000. Now, in this case, now actually Excel kind of caught on to what I was doing there, so let me go back and do this again so we can really see how that's going to work. So I'm going to right click here, I'll choose Insert, and I'll just clear these cells out. So we'll change this to watermelon. We'll put in 5,000. And what Excel does do, that many of us overlook, is it does try to bring the error to our attention. If we look in cell B8, there's a little green triangle. Excel's trying to warn us that, hey, there's an amount that got left out of the total there. Because notice the formula at this moment is B3 through B7. Now, one option that we do have, if we pay attention to the green triangle, is we click in here and we can say update the formula to include the cells. But many times folks overlook the green triangles, partly because they show up so often that many times they show up with false positives, and so sometimes we tend to tune them out, or we think, oh, I'll circle back and look at that later. But that's certainly one option there. You could click here, you could say update formula to include cells. That would update the formula. And when you do that, sometimes but not always, that puts Excel in a state where if I insert something at the bottom here, let's put in a new amount, then notice this time it updated the formula automatically to pick up that new row. Now, because Excel doesn't do that consistently, we don't want to rely on that behavior. If we want to have future-proof sum formulas, then here's the approach that we want to take. And we can still use the auto sum command there. So if I were to come along here and click on cell C8, if I click on auto sum, notice Excel is going to give me a preview of what it's going to sum. So it does indeed include that blank row at the bottom. I can then grab this handle, drag it up above. So now what I'm summing is C1 through C7. So we'll distinguish that from what we were summing on the other cells there. On the other cells, what we summed was B2 through B6. And so we don't have the buffer on these other rows. So we'll find then, if we come along, I right click and I insert. And so if I add new amounts here, then in this case, this formula updated automatically and captured the new amount. This formula simply shifted down there, and so that's where I have an error in my spreadsheet. Again, Excel does try to bring it to my attention, but we can just stave all that off if we create formulas that run one row above and one row below. So down here, notice I've changed the height of that row to discourage folks from typing data in there. If they want to insert a new row, they can right-click and choose Insert. They'll get a new blank row. And again, any new amount we put in there, that too would get included in that part of the spreadsheet. The next thing that we're going to look at is a way to be able to drill through our worksheets. So many times we'll have a situation where, in this case, we have a budget worksheet. That's the first worksheet that we want to summarize these amounts. And if we're not aware of the ability to drill through, then we can end up creating complex formulas where we say, take this worksheet, add it to that worksheet, add it to that worksheet. And so that plus, plus, plus arrangement can result in very tedious and very long formulas. And also, it's easy for us to leave out rows there. So the alternative is to create a formula that drills through the worksheet. So what we're going to find is that if we start out, we say equals sum, we put an open parenthesis, We can then select the first sheet that we want, such as the HR tab. Excel is going to automatically put an exclamation mark after the sheet name, which we would want to replace with a colon. So once the colon's replaced, we can then click on the final sheet that we want to sum, let's say the accounting tab. From there, we can choose the range that we wish to sum. So it could be a single cell or it could be a range of cells. That gives us a formula there where we can drill through the worksheets.